MikroTik Pppoe over Eoip. In this video, we have some simple routed network with routers PE, AC, CE, and a client router. PE is where our internet connection is. AC is where we will configure our Pppoe server. CE, on the other hand, is the router situated near our client site. So the objective is how we can centrally locate our Pppoe service and be able to serve our clients over a routed network. In this demonstration, we will make use of Eoip, but of course, there are other more efficient solutions for this. So according to MikroTik Wiki, the official MikroTik documentation, so Ethernet over IP or Eoip is a MikroTik RouterOS protocol that creates an Ethernet tunnel between two routers on top of an IP or layer 3 connection. It makes sense for our case to use an Ethernet tunnel since Pppoe is a layer 2 protocol. Let's verify our configuration on our PE router. So let's connect. So let's verify the IP addresses. So we have 10.0.0.1/30. We have 10.0.0.5/30 on Ether3. We have the loopback interface. We have an internet connection on Ether1. So let's check our routes, IP routes. So we have some default route. We have also our Ospf route, and we are able to see the loopback IP of AC or the access concentrator, as well as the CE customer edge. So let's verify if we have an internet connection. So quadruple 8. And yes, we do have an internet connection. So one more. So www.google.com. And yes, we do have an internet connection on our PE router. Next, we'll check our access concentrator. So we have connected via Roman on our PE router. So we have our Roman neighbors. So let's connect and let's check the IP addresses first and verify. So we have our interface going to PE Ether2, which is correctly addressed. We have our loopback interface. So let's go to our routes, IP routes, and we have our default route being redistributed by our PE router. We have some Ospf learned routes, which is this one, and we have also our Ospf learned routes, which is the loopback of the CE as well as the loopback of the PE. So we have, let's check Ipdns. So if we don't have, let's put one Ipdns. So let's also check first the access concentrator IP pool. So we don't have, so let's create a pool, Pppoe pool, and 172.16.0.100, 172.16.0.200 for our pool. Let's go to PPP and profile. So we don't have any profile. So Pppoe profile, and the local will be, for example, 172.16.0.1. The remote address will be our Pppoe pool. The DNS server, let's provide some DNS servers, and as this is an example, we don't have limits and we don't have any other settings such as queue or scripts. So let's have a secret. So client 1, so this will be used by our client 1 Pppoe client. So password will be the same as the username. So client 1 service, we could leave at any, but we will use Pppoe. So Pppoe profile, apply, okay. So for our Pppoe server, so for now, because we are awaiting for the Eoip tunnel, so let's leave the interface as L2TP or the default first, and we will just come back and change it later. So we have our profile, we have our secrets, we have our Pppoe server enabled, and let's just come back here on our AC should we have any further configuration needed. Now let's check our CE router. So let's connect. So again via Ramon. So let's click connect to our CE router. Let's verify the IP address. So there is only one IP address on the physical interface, which is going to Ether 1 or on Ether 1. So let's go IP addresses. So 10.0.0.6/30 on Ether 1. We have a loopback address of 172.31.255.3, which is on this CE. On Ether 3, we don't have any IP addresses because we will implement Pppoe on our client. So let's verify the routes, IP routes. And yes, we did get a default route coming from our Ospf neighbor, which is our PE router. We have the loopback interfaces of PE and AC as well. So let's check Ipdns. So let's just put here, and we have our Ipdns. So let's just verify if we have an internet connection here, and let's do a ping www.google.com. And yes, we do have an internet connection on our CE router. So right now we will try to establish an Eoip tunnel on our AC going towards our CE. So again, we need some form of layer 2 tunneling because we are on a routed network. In fact, we are running Ospf dynamic routing protocol, and our Pppoe service cannot traverse, which is we want it to be on our CE router, and our client will be able to get some Pppoe connection or authenticate to our Pppoe server. So in order to do that, we need to have some tunneling or layer 2 tunnel in order to tunnel our Pppoe. Hence, our title is Pppoe over Eoip. And let's begin to configure. So we are here in our AC router. So in order to configure Eoip, so we go to interfaces, Eoip tunnel, click the plus sign. For simplicity's sake, let's just rename the name of the Eoip tunnel to Pppoe tunnel. So we could use the IANA reservation for the MAC address of the Eoip tunnel. So 000005E80. So we could use 0002 as well because this is 2, for example. So the local address will be the loopback address. So for AC, we have two choices. We could use the Ether 2 IP address or the loopback interface. So we'll just use the loopback interface. So it's better than having a physical interface IP address. So the remote address will be the CE IP address. So 172.31.255.3. Okay. So the loopback address of the CE, and the tunnel ID will be a number, for example, that 10. And here we have name, the MAC address, the local address, the remote address, and the tunnel ID. So the configuration in AC will be practically the same as in CE, but we will just reverse the local address and the remote address, but the tunnel ID will be the same, and the MAC address we would also configure a different one on our CE configuration. So if we don't have anything to change or to configure here, click apply, click OK. So it is not running yet. So let's just create a bridge. Not really necessary, but for the purposes of being standardized on our CE, so let's just create a bridge here, Pppoe Bridge, and we will add the Pppoe tunnel or the Eoip tunnel on this newly created bridge. And we will now configure CE, and we will connect via the Winbox. So here in our CE interfaces, Eoip tunnel, click the plus sign, and let's just name it the same, but this is not mandatory, so you could also name it a different name, but in order to standardize, so let's just put in this same name. So for the MAC address, so 00005E and 80 and 00, then 04 for example, or 03, because it's the loopback ID is .3 for standard sake. So we have the local address that will be the loopback address of the CE .3, and the remote address 172.168.2.2 that will be the AC IP address on the loopback interface. The tunnel ID will be 10. So our changes are practically the same: the name, the MAC address, the local address, the remote address, and the tunnel ID number. So click apply, click OK, and we hope that it's running. And yes, it's running, but we will really test if it's running if our Pppoe service can go through the client. So in CE router's case, we need to bridge the Eoip tunnel and the Ether 3 since our Pppoe client, the client 1 router, is connected there. So here it's really important to create a bridge. So Pppoe bridge, and click OK. Ports, so we will add in the Pppoe tunnel. Notice that it's not slanted. And Pppoe bridge, apply OK, and the Ether 3 and to our Pppoe bridge. So we have created a bridge because we need to bridge the tunnel and the Ether 3 physical interface. One quick look on our AC router before we move to our client. So our tunnel is up, and let's just review our Pppoe, because remember the L2TP interface was chosen here instead of the tunnel or the bridge. But remember the Pppoe tunnel was part or a member of the bridge, so we will choose the bridge interface. So let's just review. We have a bridge and our tunnel is a member of this bridge. So that is why on our Pppoe server, the interface it will be listening into will be the Pppoe bridge. So just review that we have a profile, we have a secret client 1 on this profile, and we have a Pppoe server. So we will now go to our client 1 and attempt to authenticate and see if we got some connection. Alright, so here we have our client router, and let's click connect. Okay, so here, very simple, on Ether 1 interface, we will just configure the Pppoe client. So let's just double check. We don't have PHP client. There is. We'll just remove that. So other than that, so let's go to interfaces. And okay, so it's here already or pre-configured, but nevertheless, let's just review. So we go to interface and Pppoe client. This will add this interface. So general, the name of the Pppoe client interface, and the interface or the physical interface it's listening into. In this case, it's Ether 1. Next, you need to supply the username and password as per configuration on our AC. You could add DNS, for example, use peer DNS, so that we will not add manually a DNS setting here, or we could just simply add, for example, that one. Add default route, so that there will be a route here, a default route on our client 1 router. So authenticated. So let's click apply, click OK, and it's authenticated again. So in order to really verify if we have Pppoe connection is if we have an IP address. And remember, our pool is 172.16.0.200 or from 100 to 200, and the Pppoe tunnel IP on AC side is 172.16.0.1. So let's double check if we have connection. So we could verify first our AC tunnel IP if we could reach, and yes, we are able to reach. How about internet connection this time? And yes, we have an internet connection, and since we have put Ipdns here, we could try and see if we are able to resolve or reach domain names in the internet. And yes, we are able to reach. So let's try to ping another IP domain name. Sorry. So we have www.mikrotik.com, and yes, we are able to reach this website as well. So back here in our AC, so we have noticed in the PPP active connections, we have the client one that is connected and is able to go to the internet. So as you notice, we are able to successfully traverse the Pppoe, which is a layer 2 protocol, over a routed network by using MikroTik proprietary RouterOS protocol for layer 2 tunneling, which is the Eoip. And from there, our Pppoe service traversed to this tunnel, and in turn, the physical Ether3 is also bridged to this tunnel. So that is why our Pppoe client was able to authenticate, get an IP address, and be able to go to the internet via that particular information. Let's have the same objective on our Pppoe over Eoip, but this time we will be using all in our routers, RouterOS version 7.1, the stable version. So we are here in our PE, so notice the difference. There's already an IPv6 that is listed on our neighbors, meaning to say the IPv6 package is by default enabled. So let's click connect, and you see some changes already. Okay, so let's do the same. Let's verify the IP address. So IP addresses, nothing much is changed here. So we have going to AC, going to CE, and we have the same loopback interface. If we take a look at the settings, so we don't have much change on our IP addresses on RouterOS version 7. Now let's look at our routes. So IP routes, and we do have our default route, and you notice a different flag, DAD, dynamic, active, and this time another D for DHCP. So you also notice the gateway has %. So we have our DAO, and just a quick look at the plus sign, a different IP route configuration. So at least there is an immediate gateway. We have a different suppressed hardware offload, and so on and so forth. VRF is being moved here. So more on this on our learning on version 7 in future videos. So we still have our loopback interface, which is learned via Ospf on our CE and our AC. So that 2 is AC and that 3 is our CE. And just a quick look at the Ospf, since we are running Ospf. So routing, so you have more options now here on version 7. So routing Ospf, the menus are different this time. So if you can remember its interface, or if you have seen an Ospf configuration, so now we have instances, and there is no default instance, so you have to click plus sign, and you have this a different menu here. So once you create an instance, you will create an area. So again, area is not now default. Click a plus sign in order to create an area. Next, it will be the interface template. So the interfaces here are those being learned or being declared here on your interface templates. So now you could also group the interfaces together, and the area and the type of network. You see that there is no network tab because it's here on the network. The Ospf interface templates, the networks is here. And if you'll notice also, I didn't declare any networks, but however, we have our neighbors or neighbors adjacency that are formed in our Ospf without configuring the networks. So next we go to our AC. So Roman is still practically the same, so that's why I'm able to connect to the PE and Roman to the neighbors, which is the ACCEN client. So let's check on AC, and we have this change password now. So we have a different menu. We have WireGuard, IPv6 is here. So in AC, let's see, there's a bridge, and we have our IP address, which is the loopback interface, .2, and our Ether2 interface IP going to the PE. So it's there. So IP routes. So we didn't learn any default route, so we're going to PE again, but we learned other routes, which is this one. So this is not in our network, so we have also learned the loopback of the CE. So Ospf is working such that the PE does not redistribute the default route. Let's just go back to PE in a while. Let's just continue here. So IP pool. So we have our Pppoe pool. So nothing much is changed on the IP pool. Next is PPP. So there is now L2TP tabs here. So let's go to profile. So general. So we have some changes also here. So but we'll just configure what we know so far, like the version 6, the name, the local address, the remote address, and the DNS server. Again, we will not configure any limits for this configuration. Secrets, so still the same. Client 1, client 1. Service is Pppoe. We have some changes also here, and we will not configure them. Pppoe server. So again, this is leave as disabled for now, but we will just enable once we have configured the Eoip. So still practically the same. So here in our Pppoe, we are back here in our PE, and we'll try to redistribute the default route. So let's check first the interface list if we have created, and yes, there is an interface list. IP firewall is not in place, so we'll also configure that one. So one action will be masquerade, apply, okay. So let's just double check. Ether1 is included. Let's just double check. We have an IP address on Ether1, and let's do a ping, the tools ping, and let's do a ping on quadruple 8. And yes, we have a connection, and you notice the millisecond or the time difference on our V6 and our V7. So new terminal, IPDNS. If I have a DNS, let's just put the quad 8 for DNS. So proceed with this without going to the new password, or let's just put in a password. So admin and admin. Okay, so ping www.google.com, and yes, there is a reply. So ping www.mikrotik.com, and yes, there is a reply. So next, let's do the redistribution routing Ospf. So let's check in instance. So last time it's on instance, but it's a different view now. So originate default, there is redistribute here, but there is no default route if I have to maximize. So connected static rip Ospf and others. So let's try here in our originate default. So there is this term originate default always. So if installed, apply, okay. So let's go in or go back to our AC. So IP routes, and see, yes, we are now getting a default route from our PE route. So now let's go to our CE router. So connect, okay. So there's no password for our CE router, and this is our CE router. So let's just close this one. So IP address, so let's just verify IP address. So we have our Ether1, so that's 6. Our loopback interface is also there. So IP routes, and yes, it learned the default route. We have also this particular network and the loopback address of PE, and as well as the AC. and we will configure the Eoip tunnel as well. So this time, let's start on our CE router. So let's create a bridge first. So practically the same as our V6 demonstration. Ports will be Ether3, this one, and the Eoip tunnel in a bit later. So let's go to interfaces, Eoip tunnel, plus sign. So we have the name, so Pppoe tunnel, and let's just also follow the MAC address 00005E. We have our 8000 and we have 03. The local address will be 172.31.255.3. The remote address 172.31.255.2. The tunnel number or ID number is 10. So practically the same that we have changed. We are not touching other advanced configuration. The name, MAC address, local address, remote address, and the tunnel ID number. Click apply, click OK. So we have our tunnel interface. So we go to bridge and add so we also see Ether3 is added on the loopback instead of Pppoe Bridge. So let's correct that. And this is Pppoe tunnel on the Pppoe Bridge. So we will now go back to our AC and configure the other side of the tunnel. So here in our access concentrator interfaces Eoip tunnel, so we have the same Pppoe tunnel and the MAC address 0000, and we have 5E and 800002. The local address will be 172.31.255.2. The loopback address, just copy this one and just change the last octet to .3. The tunnel ID will be 10. Name, MAC address, the addresses, and the tunnel ID. So click apply, click OK, and hopefully it's running on version 7 on 7.1, and yes, it's running. And let's go back to our bridge, and we haven't created a bridge. So Pppoe Bridge, again, I can use the tunnel to point our Pppoe server. Okay, so I can just point it straight away, but just to make it the same as our CE, so I've created a bridge and add the port Pppoe tunnel to this particular bridge, although not necessarily needed the Pppoe bridge because I don't have any physical interface. So remember, I don't need to add the Ether2. So you only need to add an interface or to bridge an interface if there is a client on that particular physical interface. On the AC, the clients are far away from this particular router, and it is on the CE's interface. Okay, so nevertheless, let's just add that particular bridge. Let's go back to our PPP, double click and point it to the bridge, click apply, click OK, and enable this Pppoe server, and hopefully there will be no issue. Same as our version 6, we'll be able to traverse the Pppoe service down to our CE, and now we'll be able to authenticate by our client on the Pppoe connection. Let's connect to our client. So client 1. So again, the same as our V6 client 1, only needs to configure the Pppoe client. So let me remove this DHCP client. So interface, and this one, Pppoe out. So it's there as well. So Ether 1, dial out, client 1, client 1. Hopefully there is no issues in our configuration in terms of the PPP secret. Apply OK, and let's enable. Again, it's there because I prepared it, but if it's the first time and you see there are a lot of interfaces now, choices, so Pppoe client, and enable this one, and hopefully it's running. So alright, our Pppoe connection is now running. So I did go back to the AC and bridge because it was fast. The Pppoe tunnel was not on the Pppoe bridge, so I have changed that one, and our client now is running. Also verify that the secrets is on the correct profile. So we have profile, secret is on the Pppoe profile, and verify the name. So client is now running, so successful if we have an IP address, and yes, there is an IP address. So let's do some ping test, tools ping. So www, or first our tunnel interface 16.0.1, click start, and yes, there is a reply. So for example, if we have a routes, and yes, we have a routes, and this one is different, so dynamic active copy. Okay, so let's just proceed with the ping and start, and yes, I am able to go out to the internet. So I could also go to the terminal and supply a new password in order for me to see if I'm able to go to Google. So Ipdns, okay, so quadruple 8, so, and yes, I'm able to go ping www.mikrotik.com, and yes, I'm able to go. So let me review this Pppoe, and I haven't checked the peer DNS, although on AC, if you'll notice the profile, we have configured a DNS server is such that on our client we never check the use peer DNS. So once it connects and acquires an IP address and a default route, so it never configured a dynamic DNS or dynamic server for our DNS. So that's why we have put in a manual. So nevertheless, so it's successful on version 7 and version 6. So we are able to traverse the same Pppoe server over Eoip and have our clients connected via Pppoe.